Terry Fox's Marathon of Hope began 45 years ago this month. My guest made the trip with him just about every step of the way. Welcome back, Bill Vigars, up next on Brio TV, the podcast. Well, hello again, and yes, I'm joined by Bill Vigars, one rascal of a publicist back when he was setting up middle-of-the-night interviews for me and many others way back on the set of the CTV drama Night Heat. Do you remember that one? Prior to that, he helped manage Terry Fox as a 22-year-old one-legged runner put in a marathon a day in his incredible 1980 quest to raise awareness and money for cancer research. He did both in spectacular fashion, and today he's a hero to the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of cancer survivors around the world. Bill wrote a wonderful bestseller about their adventures, Terry and Me, with remaining copies on sale at 15% off this month, April, from publisher Sutherland House. The book is full of amazing stories, and we're going to hear a few of them right now. Ladies and gentlemen, here he is, Bill Vigars. Yes, here we are. Listen, Bill, okay, let's talk first about moving. You've just moved. I've just moved. Isn't that like one of the most ridiculous things to do? Tell me your experience was easier.
Well, just let me put it this way. The next time I move, they're going to be moving me out in a box because I ain't doing it again.
It's horrible. I feel the same way.
You got so much stuff accumulated. You got so much stuff that you've accumulated over the years that you think is important.
Yeah.
Particularly the memorabilia, like from the film business and my life.
Yeah.
And then you got to decide, okay, it's time to let go of this cover of TV Guide from 1987.
Right. But, well, that's what I've been doing. Yeah.
And then you go, no, I can put it over here.
Right. So, yeah. That's the thing is to move. We moved into a much smaller place. So I was forced to unclutter too, yeah. and that helped, but not nearly enough. You realize you think you uncluttered, then you get here and you've got to unclutter again. But anyway, here we are. It's good to be talking to you. And
life marches on.
It does. And let's get to it now. We're talking about your book, Terry and Me, a fantastic book from Sutherland House, I believe. And it's a bestseller, right, Bill? This thing has been a big success for you.
Yeah, it's done. You didn't know what's going to happen. It took me a long time to decide to actually do it. And then it's very rewarding on a couple levels. First off, the sales have been phenomenal. It was on, at one point, the Toronto Star Top 10 list. It was the Globe and Mail Top 10 list, Amazon Top 10. It's darn near sold out. So, but the most rewarding part of doing it has been the response I've been getting from readers. And it's very emotional. Very moving, and it makes me realize that I made the right decision on doing it.
Well, you sure did, and I'm one of those readers. It's a wonderful book. You did a great job, and I know we've known each other for many years since you were a publicist in Toronto, helping me get into the set of Night Heat in the middle of the night, way back when I was at TV Guide. So I knew you were filled with stories, Bill. We've shared quite a few, and it's wonderful that you've shared them with so many readers about such an exceptional Canadian. What is the anniversary we're coming up on now? This is just, we're almost at a point where it all began, right?
April the 12th will be the 44th anniversary of the day that he dipped his foot in the Atlantic Ocean, and him and his buddy Doug Allward started off alone, heading. Everybody said, "Well, why don't you run west to east?" And he said, "Well, I live in the west, and I want to run home."
Nice.
And
Yeah.
he actually talked about that several. He actually talked about that several times, even when he and I would have private conversations. And at one point, and it's the stories in the book when there's a big blow up. He actually just said to me, "It was quite emotional, Bill. I just want to go home. I want to go home as fast as I can."
Wow. Yeah. Well, he was doing that, running literally a marathon a day across Canada, 28 miles, right? Or something. Was that, what was his pace? It was unbelievable going
20,
west.
20, 20, 20 once again, we go back to being old guys.
Yeah.
We talk in miles.
Yes.
A marathon is 26 miles, which in metric, I believe, is 43 kilometers.
Yeah.
And I think it's really harder to run 43 kilometers than it is to run 26 miles because it's a lot less.
Well, it's a long way. I mean, Terry Fox would have run half a marathon in the time it took you and I to set up a Zoom call, I think. Right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, yes, you're right. And it was interesting. He ran 143 days. That was the length of his run. And he only took 2 days off. One was in Montreal when I asked him, I said, listen, if we want to arrive in Ottawa on Canada Day, July the 1st, you're running ahead of schedule. This is a schedule that he and I had sat down in New Brunswick. And sat down with a map of Eastern Canada. And we went, okay, 26 miles, 26 miles, and 26 miles. By the time we were in Barrie, Ontario, because he had run, to Ottawa, then to Toronto, then down to London, Ontario. And at London, Ontario, I said to him, okay, listen, why don't we go back to Toronto and head north? And he said, no, I don't want anybody to ever say I didn't run every step of the way. He ran down through Brantford and Woodstock, and then coming from London, he went back up through St. Mary's, Stratford, and Kitchener and Guelph, and then headed north. And it just amazes me of the integrity of that he had, and the determination, and also a funny thing. That first day out east, when we set down the schedule. He was used to looking at a map of British Columbia. Well, when you open a map of Ontario, the scale is different, substantially different. And he's sitting there and he points to Windsor and then he points to Niagara Falls. And he said, well, I want to run there and I want to run there. And I went, when do you want to get home? And I had to explain to them that, you're going to run from London down to Windsor.
Yeah.
That's 4 days, maybe 5. And then you're going to run because he would not, as I just said, backtrack. So now he's going to run from Windsor down to Niagara Falls, which is another 10 days.
Yeah, no.
No, and it was kind of funny. He went, "Oh, I guess I didn't realize that." And that's so. But we did get him to Niagara Falls.
I wouldn't have done that in a car, like that. That's unbelievable. And I believe in your book, it's spelled out too, that every day, every morning, he would drop a rock the night before and he would start on the exact spot that he finished. There was no, let's move a quarter mile down the road or anything. It was always the integrity was there every step of the way, right?
Yeah, I saw that the very first morning. He's up at 4:00 in the morning. We're on the road by 5. And that first morning, Doug Allward, his buddy, he's driving slowly. And he gets to this point and then he's backing up and, going back and forth. And I can't figure out what he's doing. And what he's doing is he's looking for this bag that he's buried in the gravel. And he has to open the van door and step out onto it and step right onto it. So he would finish the day exactly the same spot that he had finished, or start the exact same spot the day he had before. And if we were in the city, he would go over, touch a telephone pole or a light stand. And as I said, I don't want anybody to ever say I didn't run every step of the way.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, it's amazing. Remind people, how old was Terry Fox at this point, Bill?
He was 17 when his leg was amputated.
Wow.
And in the book, there's 2 stories. What I did was, is it was really important to me that the book had to be accurate. There couldn't be almost this, almost that. Well, I think I remember. I like to say I can remember we drive down Danforth Avenue in Toronto, and I can tell you exactly. We stopped there. We talked to somebody there. I can't find my car keys now, but I can tell you what happened 44 years ago.
Thank goodness.
So there's a lot of second or others' voices in the book. Mm-hmm. So I had a chance everybody was so cooperative, and I tracked people down, and both of his nurses, the nurse who dealt with him when he first had his leg amputated, and then the nurse who took care of him, and they were friends when he got sick and came back home. Mm. And so at 22, he was 22 when he started the run, and he turned 23 on the road. We had a birthday party for him in Gravenhurst, and there are many, many funny stories in the book, by the way. Terry had a wonderful, wonderful sense of humor. Mm-hmm. People remember Terry with that look of him when he's running, of concentration. It's pain. It's you can feel the pain when you see him. But on the front cover of the book is how I remember, and it's a big smile.
It is. It's a great shot.
Because when he was off the road, and we were sitting around at night having dinner, or we were at breaks for a few minutes through the day, it was light. It was jovial. Some days were not. Some days, I don't know how he did it, particularly in southern Ontario, where it was a lot of the times it was in the low 90s and the humidity. You know what it's like can be in Ontario, and how he physically was able to do that. But he had a great, great sense of humor, very dry sense of humor. And I do want to tell, through this, I want to tell a couple of them. My favorite is Bobby Orr, we had dinner with him at the Four Seasons. Wow. There's Doug and Darrow, Terry's brother, and myself, and Bobby Orr and Terry. And so Bobby Orr goes to the bathroom. This is the first part of the story. And Terry starts picking the croutons off of his Caesar salad, going, I'm going to tell my grandchildren that I stole the croutons off of Bobby Orr's salad. And of course, in my bad sense of humor, I said, well, I'm going to tell my kids I heard Bobby Orr take a pee. But later on, we're on the road, and we get a message from Standard Brands, and I'm sure Bobby didn't know this went down, but they, through the head office, come to me and say, we'll give Terry a brand new car. And by the way, Standard Brands products, one of them, and still is Planters Peanuts. Right. And of course, their mascot, Mr. Peanut, with the top hat and the monocle and the cane. Sure. And the pitch is, we'll give Terry a brand new car if Terry will let Mr. Peanut run the last mile with him in English Bay. And Terry just kind of looks down and shakes his head, scratches his forehead, and looks up at me with his smile and goes, Bill, that's a really, really good idea, as long as I can wear the Mr. Peanut outfit.
I think people would rather have seen that. That's hilarious.
Yeah, that was his way of, telling him politely no. And then another time,
he was smart, Bill, because the headlines would be, Terry Fox is running for peanuts, right? Or
Boom. Yeah. Another time, we're up in Sault Ste. Marie, and we think he's broken his ankle. It turns out to be really bad shin splints. We've flown him back, we thought secretly, to the Sault Ste. Marie hospital, but word gets out. And as he's leaving the hospital, there's a media scrum going on. And the media were wonderful with him. There was never any harshness. They were very kind and understanding. So they're answering questions, and Terry would always patiently answer all of them. And at one point, a guy says, so Terry, which one of your ankles is bothering you?
Oh, my goodness.
And once again, Terry looks down with a smile and looks up at the guy and looks right in his face and goes, the one that I don't have.
Funny.
And of course, everybody broke up.
That's hilarious.
Even the guy who asked the question. So, wow. And that indicates of what a good, gentle, kind man he was.
And quick thinking. That's funny.
Yeah.
Don't go away. We're back with Bill Vigars in just a moment. Well, here we are at a special seance for long-suffering fans of the Toronto Maple Leafs, who've been waiting since '67 for another Stanley Cup. The good news is that sports fans can see that '67 win, plus highlights from the '62 Leafs victory, on Wednesday, April 10 at 1 p.m. at the Westdale Cinema in Hamilton. It's all part of 2 hours of rare sports films projected in 16mm on the giant Westdale screen. Now, wait just a minute. I think there's a familiar voice coming through. Is it?
Hello, Canada and hockey fans, United States, and everybody else from ghost to ghost. Oh, Henderson made a wild stab forward and fell. Here's another shot right for the score.
Foster Hewitt. Foster, can you tell us, will the Leafs finally end 57 years of frustration and win the Stanley Cup?
Well, Bill, I wish I knew, but I'd have to ask Harold Bellard, and he didn't make it up here. But wait, here's Howie Meeker. Maybe Howie knows.
Oh, good. Howie.
Gosh, golly darn, Bill, that Trent checks out, count the crowd. Oh, bingo, we got a hockey game here.
Oh, Mr. Meeker, tell us, do the Leafs finally win the Stanley Cup?
Well, gosh, golly darn, Bill, hold on to your jockstrap. One guy who might know is Paul Morris, of course, Billy. He's the darndest best announcer ever at Maple Leaf Gardens.
Okay, that's fantastic. Listen, Mr. Morris, please tell us, do the Leafs finally win it all this year?
Toronto goal scored by number 34, Austin Matthews. Assist by Mitch Marner and William Nylander. Time 5:04.
Wow, Paul, was that the Stanley Cup winning goal?
No, don't ask me, Bill. I'm still alive and in hell like you are. The Gardens thanks you for your questions. See you at the Westdale on April the 10th at 1 p.m.
Well, time once again to speak with Sweet Emily Gagne from Hollywood. Sweet Emily, how are you today?
I'm great, Bill.
Oh, I don't know. I saw your banners. I saw the ads. It looked kind of scary, this one show. What's going on?
Yeah, it's called Until I Kill You, and it is a UK true crime drama that tells the story of Delia Balmer, who survived a bunch of violent attacks from her boyfriend, John Sweeney, who was, spoiler alert, a murderer. So if you're into true crime stuff and you're into UK dramas, this is for you. And this show is available on demand right now. But if you want to tune in week to week like old school, you can do that starting April 18th.
All right. Now, what if you're like me, you're scared of shows with a title where people get killed? What else you got?
Well, you know what? We've got the new season of A Year in Film, which is our original series, which is about different iconic years in cinema. So we're talking about 1977 this year. So that's like Star Wars, Close Encounters, Slapshot, Eraserhead. Also 1988, personal favorite year of mine, Beetlejuice, Child's Play, Working Girl, Coming to America, 1991, 2000. So these are all just, film experts talking about the iconic films of these years.
I saw Star Wars and Annie Hall the day they opened in 1977. So I'm going to want to tune into that one for sure.
You are. And it's going to be April 11th is that first episode at 9 p.m. And then the rest of the episodes will premiere the following days, the 12th, 13th, and 14th.
All right. Fantastic. Go back to the days of my youth, 1977, with Hollywood Suite this month. See you, Emily.
Thank you, Bill.
And we're back with Bill. Well, I'm interested because you and I talked. We did a podcast earlier. We covered a lot of Terry's, the parts of the Marathon of Hope through Quebec and different things. But I'm very curious about, and we're getting a tour of your beautiful condo. It looks really quite sensational, Bill.
Well, thank you very much. And the reason we're moving around is I just realized the battery on my computer is slowly going down. Actually, much faster than I anticipated. And I apologize to everybody.
No problem. Get plugged in. We don't want to lose you.
We're back, and I have a giant halo.
Okay. As you should have a giant halo. Yeah.
A square one too.
I'm used to you having both of those. You do have a square halo. That's hilarious. Listen, but what I want to know, you mentioned Sault Ste. Marie. It's the part of the trip where on this marathon, because I spoke with a buddy of mine who does these great documentaries every year. It's all called Tripping. So it's tripping the Niagara, tripping the Bruce, tripping the Rideau Canal. His new one coming up in April, and this is Mitch's area, is tripping the French River.
Oh, wow.
So these are areas sort of, Terry would have had to have, I mean, I've driven through Wawa and up across the northern shore of Lake Superior, and I know his marathon reached a point close to not Fort Williams, but Thunder Bay.
Port Arthur, Thunder Bay, Port Arthur, Fort William.
Right.
I actually worked in radio when it was called Port Arthur, Fort William.
There you go. Okay.
1968.
Yeah, there. Wow, amazing. Okay, so I know there's a wonderful. I've been to the statue, the tribute to Terry that's there at that point, but that is a march through cedars and mosquitoes. I mean, you talked about 90 degrees in southern Ontario, but talk about a lonely stretch of road that goes on and on and on, right?
Yeah, and even Terry at one point said, we kind of joke, when is Ontario going to end?
Yeah,
he went through Prince Edward Island in a day.
Yeah,
and then every province he went through, he would put it on the back of his shirt. But I tell you, Northern Ontario was probably, there were so many things that happened and so many memories. When I wrote the book, I had driven many times the stretch between Edmonton, New Brunswick, and Sault Ste. Marie. Mm-hmm. Bits and pieces, not the whole at one time. I lived in Toronto. I lived in St. Thomas. So up to Barrie, my wife from Sudbury. So I've been to Ottawa. So I had driven all of these sections of his journey, but I had never driven the stretch between Sault Ste. Marie and Thunder Bay. Mm-hmm. So what I did was I worked with Ian Harvey, who used to work for the Toronto Sun.
Yes,
he and I have been friends for. We met the same time as you and I back in the night heat days.
Used to work. I
actually had him and Jeremy Brown and a few of those people. I don't know if you were one of the guys in the gambling scene, but anyway, that's when I met Ian. And the directors.
The only gambling was them letting me write for the paper, Bill. So, yeah.
Yes, that was a gamble. So anyway, Ian and I flew up to the Sioux, stayed a day over there because we had Sault Ste. Marie. We actually spent 5 days there, coming in and going out, because once we left the Sioux, there wasn't, as you say, there's nothing.
Yeah,
and so we drove up to Thunder Bay, and we stopped in all the little towns, and we took 2 days driving up, and we'd stop and go into town, and we'd tell them what we were doing, and everybody, it was amazing. Everybody had a story about Terry Fox. If they weren't there then, their mother was there, or they go, oh, you've got to see Gladys over at the senior center. She let him use his hot tub, or the hotel up in Terrace Bay, where they have left the motel room exactly as it was when Terry stayed there. And when he left, they cut a chocolate bar wrapper, his room key. I think he forgot a sock. And they've kept it there at that motel, and they've left that motel room exactly the same as it is. And I know several people have made journeys up just to stay in the room that Terry Fox did. And that monument, by the way, the story on the Thunder Bay, I can tell you a wonderful story on the Thunder Bay monument. So when Terry finishes the run, of course, it's everybody remembers it was traumatic. I think it affected all of Canada.
Yeah.
If you were alive back then, you realized the impact that Terry had that summer and what impact he had on everybody when he had to finish the run. Well, we get him on the plane, we fly him home, and Lou Fine, who worked with the Cancer Society and had been with Terry for about 3 weeks at that time, went back to the spot that he had finished and had the presence of mind to take a Terry Fox t-shirt out of the car, climb over the fence, go about 20 yards into the woods, and tie it to a tree. so that we would know exactly where he was stopped. Shortly after that, by the way, the Minister of Transport at that time, he's gone now, is James Snow.
Yeah.
Who he and Leo Bernier, who was the Minister of Northern Affairs at the time, they were the movers who got that monument put up. But James talked about how he had gone and found and retrieved Terry's shirt that Terry himself had, after he got sick, had climbed over the fence and tied it. And I'm going, how could that possibly have been? And it didn't. Lou finding it, and it got to the point where he was telling the story so many times, I had to call his constituent's office and say, can you let him know that a gentleman named Lou found it that way? But anyway, originally they put that monument up just up the road a bit because the road was too narrow.
Yeah.
And initially the monument went up about a kilometer or maybe 2 or 3 miles down the road from where he actually stopped. Then they widened the road. And the monument that exists today is the second location.
Okay. Wow. Didn't know that.
And that location is, if you have anybody has the chance of visiting it, if you've been there, you'll know what I'm saying. They've put it up on a rise, quite a high rise over the highway with a spectacular view of the Lake Superior. And this... it's the statue itself is probably 15 feet high, and it's on a pedestal that's probably 8 or 9 feet high. So it's this majestic statue of Terry, which I had the fortunate opportunity to work with the artist as he was, making it.
Yeah.
And to see it is breathtaking and really is a great tribute to Terry.
Yeah, amazing. I saw it in 1987, Bill, so it might have still been in the first location at that point.
I was there for both of the unveilings, so I think it was a little bit after that the new location. Okay. So you're going to have to go for another drive.
I will. Yeah, it's worth it. Absolutely. It is very inspiring. And of course, there's statues of Terry all over. There's one in Ottawa facing the Parliament buildings, and there's several in front of the Rogers Centre in Vancouver, right?
There's some great statues. There's the one at Mile Zero in St. John's, and I have this great picture of the statue. And docked immediately behind him is the Canadian icebreaker, Terry Fox. And so you're looking at the statue, and right behind it is this Canadian Coast Guard icebreaker.
Amazing.
It's a very large ship. Yeah. Then in there's one in his hometown. There's one at the library in his hometown. There's one up at SFU. The one that's in front of Rogers Stadium in Vancouver was done by Douglas Copeland, the author of Generation X.
Wow.
And it's 5 separate statues of Terry.
Yeah.
Of different sizes, from life size to, so when you go up the street and look down at it, you actually it looks like he's running towards you. And as you end up on the West Coast, so there's one at Mile Zero in St. John's, and in Victoria, there's one at Mile Zero, another beautiful statue, and a wonderful story there. A local businessman named Rob Reed, and he and some hockey players, the brothers from Victoria, the name escapes me. That's horrible. But anyway, he decided he wanted to put up a statue of Terry. He made all the arrangements, ordered the statue, got ready to set it up, and then he told the city. He said,
"That's the way to do things."
And then,
good for him.
He said, "If I had gone to them, it would have taken 3 years of studies and everything else."
Absolutely right. Well, here's the thing. In Toronto, they had this big thing about Dundas Street, and
yes,
I grew up on Dundas Street. When I was born, it was at 5308. Then my family moved to 4686. So I lived on Dundas Street 20 years. They wanted to rename the street, and then Dundas Square. So they've got a new name for the Dundas Square downtown on Yonge, but people are saying, well, you just name it after Terry Fox. What is more obvious than that? Could somebody please get a grip? There could be, and there's a Terry Fox Boulevard right in Brampton where I've just moved from. It's nice to see these recognitions, but there could be even more. There could be on our money. There could be different things, right?
You know that Dundas Square one?
Yeah.
I don't know if you know, but I just read, and maybe I was reading something, but I think it was 2 days they changed their mind from what they were going to call it, and now they're going to call it the Gord Downey Square. And
no, I did not know that had been arrived at.
And if that is true, next to Terry, there could not be a better name for that area.
Yeah, no, I'll drink to that. But I do think Terry Fox, my goodness, you can't have enough honors to him. And you mentioned his, somebody found a sock and the shirt was tied. Was there a pair of his running shoes at the Sports Hall of Fame? What has happened to artifacts like that, Bill?
Well, what happened is at the end of the run, Sports Hall of Fame contacted me, and I was able to donate to them a T-shirt that he'd worn, a pair of shorts that he had worn, and a pair of shoes. And the deal was, as long as it stays on display in perpetuity, and a copy of the statue in Thunder Bay.
Wow.
As the deal was, as long as it stays on display, it is yours in perpetuity. Then over the years, I had other paraphernalia, my own stuff, some other T-shirts. Over the years, I would give them away to people. Somebody maybe who had cancer, some kid who was something special. And it got to the point where I had basically nothing right. About 7 or 8 years ago, I decided to call. The Sports Hall of Fame is now in Calgary. And I called them and spoke to the executive director and told her what I just told you. And I said, is it still on display? And she said, yes. And I said, I really would like something back. And I said, I gave everything. He said, as a matter of fact, I had a copy of the statue from Thunder Bay, because when the artist was building the statue, I would go over to his studio, and this would be in the fall of 1980, right after the run. And I would, he'd have the head. And the head was probably four feet high, and the hair. And I'd say, well, the curl should be this, and he was carving it. Nice. So I was able to go a little bit this and a little bit that. So I said to this woman, I said, and I had this copy of the statue, and I lost it. And she said, no, you didn't. It's sitting right in front of me. And I would, you're kidding. She said, yes, you gave us that. And I said, I'll do a deal. You can have everything else, but I want the statue back. And there it is. It sits in my living room.
Well, that's beautiful. And I'm glad you got it back. And I recognized it when we were speaking earlier and you were in the other room. I saw it up behind you. And I was going to ask, is that a statue of Terry Fox? That's a fantastic story, Bill. I'm glad that they made that deal. It's certainly deserving. More on Terry Fox and the Marathon of Hope when Vigars returns. What's new on Paramount Plus? Meet a Gentleman in Moscow, premiering exclusively on the streaming service at the end of March. Based on a best-selling novel, the series stars Ewan McGregor as Count Alexander Rostov. The good news, he's spared immediate execution in the aftermath of the Russian Revolution. The bad news, however, he's banished to an attic room in the opulent Hotel Metropole, threatened with death if he ever sets foot outside again. So what's a comrade to do? Rostov enters a whole new world of emotional discovery where he gradually learns the true value of friendship, family, and love. Mary Elizabeth Winstead also stars as glamorous actress Anna Urbanova. And remember, there's a mountain of premium entertainment for audiences of all ages, including programming from Showtime, BET, CBS, Comedy Central, MTV, Nickelodeon, Paramount Pictures, and the Smithsonian Channel, all on Paramount Plus. Well, what's new this month on Super Channel? Well, giddy up for the 11th season of When Calls the Heart, found exclusively in Canada on Super Channel Heart and Home. There are, of course, many burning questions from last season's shocking finale. School teacher Elizabeth, Erin Krakow, she's saddled up with her Mountie man Nathan Grant, played by former Brio TV podcast guest Kevin McGarry. Can these two ride off into the sunset and still manage parenting obstacles, huh? There are plenty of other obstacles to unravel as Hope Valley heads into the 1920s. Hardys and McGarrys can look forward to 12 new Season 11 episodes. And don't forget, all 111 binge-worthy past episodes are available on Super Channel On Demand. Remember, Super Channel, an all-Canadian service, is available via most cable providers across the country, as well as streaming live and on demand with Amazon Prime Video channels and Apple TV+. You can also check out Super Channel Plus, available now on the Roku platform in Canada. Here he is again, my pal, Bill Vigars. Just to remind people, you were with Terry every step of the way. It's all in your book, Terry and Me, the story, speaking, of course, with Bill Vigars, who was the guy with Terry run that run across Canada and is the keeper of the flame and very much today still very much involved in the fight for a cure for cancer. And Bill, tell us, I think in terms of worldwide, the money raised by all your efforts, Terry Fox's marathon, is closing in on a big, big number, right?
Closing in to close to $1 billion.
Isn't that incredible?
But, I'm just on a very small role. I've attributed the lasting legacy to Terry, to the teachers across the country, who, from the very beginning, used Terry in the classroom to teach their students about hard work and not giving up and determination and chasing your dream, but reminding them, like Terry, you can dream anything, but dreams can come true if you try and you work hard. And he can be used in the classroom in so many different areas. And then it's these community runs that in every community across the country and around the world are all based on volunteers. And there's many of the runs across Canada 44 years later. The person who started the run in 1944, or rather 44 years ago, 1981, they're still running the runs. I have two wonderful stories. There's brand new runs popping up all over. There's a gentleman by the name of Mr. Reed in Australia who has been working very hard to get a run going there and now have two runs in Australia and in New Zealand as well. Two new ones in London, England. And a few years ago, my wife went to Cuba where at one time, 3 million people used to run on a Sunday, and I think it was in March. And the Cuban national radio would simply come on at 10 o'clock in the morning. They'd say, it's time for the Terry Fox run. And it wasn't organized. People just came out of their houses and went and ran.
Wow.
And she was on a holiday, and she'd taken a bunch of tattoos of Terry and came across a bunch of kids playing baseball, with a stick and a leather, rolled up piece of leather. And she said, I've got some Terry. And the kids went crazy. They knew who Terry Fox was. And she asked somebody, why is Terry Fox so big in Cuba? And they said, when Terry Fox ran with an artificial leg in shorts, nobody had ever seen that. Same thing here in Canada. I think you'd agree.
Right.
And cancer was a taboo word. And he brought cancer out in the open in Cuba.
Wow.
My own personal story is about 8 years ago, my son got sick he's a school principal in China. He's been there for years. I had to go, and he was very sick. I had to go. I get to the hospital, and he's okay. But he said, Dad, I'm supposed to go and take my students to a school run. And he was in a little city of 6 billion people called Changsha. And they were to travel to Guangzhou, which is a major metropolis, and participate in a Terry Fox run. I had no idea what to expect. So I go with about 100 16-year-olds on the bullet train overnight to Guangzhou. And the run is being held on a very high-end golf course on the driving range. And I'm finding, I don't know anything except as I'm showing up and finding and going where it is. And then I go up in the second level, and the governor of the province is there. The local general manager of Four Seasons, who were the big sponsors for many, many years, the mayor of the city, business leaders. And I'm looking out at 8,000 Chinese kids wearing Terry Fox shirts with the exact same image of Terry that was in Canada that year. The only difference was the lettering was in Chinese. And I can remember standing there looking at this sea of kids honoring Terry Fox and thinking to myself, he'd never believe the legacy he left and the impact he had on people.
Wow. Yeah, it's mind-blowing. What a story, Bill. And there's so many of them like that in Terry and Me, which is a wonderful book. Really recommend it. It's been through a few printings, I imagine, Bill, already, right?
No, exactly. And it actually hasn't. This is the very first printing.
Wow.
I understand they print 7,500 copies. And I'm told, first off, if you Google what is the average success rate of a nonfiction book in Canada, it's between 250 to be sold in a year. To be a bestseller, you have to sell a nonfiction somewhere between 3,500 and 4,000.
Right.
And this, publishers have told me this book now is well over 600 or 6,000.
Yeah, no, that's huge.
I'm hoping for a second printing. There's some other stuff in the works which I really can't talk about that might raise this whole thing up to a different level.
Okay.
But it's very rewarding, and I have to tell you a couple of stories. I just got an email in the middle of the night, and it was from a CBC person who had interviewed me, and she had just read something about Terry Fox, and she wrote me to say, I just read your book, and I'm in the hospital in Ottawa, and I'm being treated for blood stem for cancer, and I now have cancer. And I thank you so much for writing the book. You've given me so much hope, just like Terry did.
Wow.
And then when we first moved to this new neighborhood, I was sitting at dinner talking to some people about Terry, and this lady said, "Who are you talking about?" And I looked at her and I said, "Terry Fox." And she said, "I've never heard of him." And,
what?
Well, it turns out that she had just moved from the States to Canada permanently with her husband. And of course, I sit and talk to her a bit and tell her about him. And she said, "Oh my God, I'm so interested in that." So I dropped the book off at her house. And about a week later, I get this wonderful letter. And she says, "Every night I like to read in bed." And she said, when we were younger, I used to read to my husband, or he would read to me when we couldn't afford anything, and that was our entertainment. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting in bed the other night reading, and he said, what's so interesting? What are you reading? She was on chapter 10, and she started reading to him, and he was so enthralled that she went back to the beginning and then started reading to him the whole book. Wow. And it was the last sentence of her letter that said, "Yeah, that was one of the main reasons you wrote this, Bill." And she said, "Thank you for introducing me to a Canadian hero. Thank you for introducing me to Canada and how Canadian people honor such a man.
Oh,
Thank
man.
you for your book." Yeah.
So wasn't that wonderful? What satisfaction you must have from that. And Bill, just, if through his efforts and yours and everyone involved, a kid his age now would would live, right? Like he would have,
Yes.
the money has been raised to such a point of cancer research and technology we're now in an age where they can do so many things, right?
There's people don't realize cancer is not one disease. There's 200 types of different types of cancer.
Yeah.
But for instance, there's major progress made in prostate cancer and breast cancer. The type of cancer that Terry had, osteosarcoma, in all likelihood, you would not lose the leg. There would be no need to, about 80% of the cases. And the life expectancy is now also around 80%. Wow. So, Terry had a dream. He said, I'm not a dreamer, but I have to be. And someday, and I'm also reading about the advances in cancer research. I was reading about this stem cell. And some of these things where they're attacking the disease by going directly to the cancerous cell. And the scientists who were working on it, as a matter of fact, it was a major Toronto company. And the scientist was saying there's not that far ahead when the need for chemotherapy and radiation is no longer going to be necessary.
Wow, isn't that amazing? That's such a horrible ordeal. Now, I'm sure from reading your book and some insight into Terry Fox that he believed that he could run this right across Canada when he started out. But he probably was told at some point that this might not be possible, right?
Everybody tried to dissuade him. Mom and Dad, Mom right to the very end said, "No, you're not. No, you're not." He said, "Yes, I am." And Mom says, "Why don't you just run across British Columbia?" And his answer was, "People get cancer all across country, all across Canada." Wow. And he was very, very stubborn. You have to be stubborn to do what he did. And then very at the beginning, and again, that's all in the book. Initially, the Cancer Society was not fully behind him. Yeah. And up until very close to him being in Ontario, they still weren't 100% in. Ontario, I don't know how it works at the time. And by the way, Cancer Society is a wonderful organization. It was then, it is today. Mm-hmm. It was the personalities that were involved at the time.
Right.
And there were 7 districts in Ontario, and the 2 biggest ones, Hamilton and Toronto, didn't want in, because they said we don't have enough volunteers. And I'm trying to tell them back then, it's you don't need volunteers. It just happens. Yeah. He runs down the street. It just happens. And it came down to a meeting. I had gotten a call from the guys who were doing the documentary when he was in Montreal. And and John Simpson's the gentleman's name, still alive, lives up in Huntsville. And he called me and he said, "Bill, you got to do something. The guys have been living in the van. They haven't had a shower in a week. They all have colds. They've run out of money. They've run out of gas money." He said, "I put them up in a motel tonight, and if you don't do something, this thing's not even going to get to Ontario." There was a big meeting, and within 6 days after that, I had joined him in Drummondville, Quebec. And I once again, another funny story in the book, I don't speak French. And the Quebec Provincial Police were trying to get him off the highway. They had already moved him off the major highways onto the secondary roads, and now they're trying to get him to run on back roads. And everybody goes, "Oh, that's terrible." But the reality was they were afraid about him getting hit. Right. So it was very dangerous. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I call my friend Ray Bedard, lived in Welland, and I just moved from Welland, and he could speak French. I said, "Ray, I need you to come to Quebec with me to because I need somebody to speak French." And he said, "Well, when?" And I said, "I need you in about 4 hours at the Toronto airport." And he went, "Yeah, sure, okay." You're young back then. Mm. So we arrive at 6:00 in the morning. We find Terry out on the highway, halfway between Drummondville and Montreal. And he's at a rest break, and we're standing at the side of the road. And up shows a police car and then a second police car. And I go over and talk to them, and I'm in shirt and shorts, and so are the other 3 guys. Ray had no idea what he'd signed up for. He's in a suit coat and a white shirt, no tie, but he's kind of a jet. And I go over and start talking to the police, and they're adamant. They want him off the road. It's basically a gravel road they want him on now. And I'm not getting anywhere. I go over to Ray and I said, you gotta keep us on the road. I don't care what you say to him. You got to talk to him. And he goes, okay. And so we're all leaning against the car watching all this go down. It goes on for about 15 minutes. And then finally he turns to us, thumbs up. Okay, the policemen get in their car, drive away. Off down the road we get. I never ask. I don't ask for 25 years until I'm sitting in a bar having a beer. Really. And I said, we're shooting the shit about the whole run and everything else like that. And I said to him, remember that day in Quebec and you talked to the police? What did you say to them? And he said, well, at first I wasn't getting anywhere. Then I switched to French. And he said they got a little lighter, but they were still adamant. And he said, I don't know where it came from, but all of a sudden he said, I've been sent by the Prime Minister's office to make sure that Terry Fox arrives in Ottawa for the July 1st celebrations, and we need the cooperation of the Quebec Police Department. And he said, they bought it.
Well, that is a funny story that you waited 25 years. I'm glad you got the answer. All these stories are in Terry and Me. It's a great book, Bill. And Terry was lucky he had a stubborn guy running next to him, you, and it made a lot of things happen. I want to just quickly ask, because I'm going to have to run upstairs here, but the one other thing off topic, because you and I met. You were really a lot of fun with doing promotion and publicity for networks in Toronto. Night Heat, of course, was the main show, but others as well. And we just lost, of course, Joe Flaherty from SCTV. Did you ever encounter him? Did you ever work with him? Have any stories about him?
I never worked with him. I only had one encounter with him.
Okay.
And that's when it was Maniac Mansion.
Right.
And he played Dr. Edison, I think it was the guy's character's name.
Yeah.
And anyway, my girlfriend at the time was in the hair and makeup department. And I was standing in the trailer with her. And Flaherty was sitting in the chair. And the door opens, and standing in the doorway is Martin Short. And Joe just looks at him with a kind of a smile, and it was a half a joke, but really it was a kind of he went, oh, shit, it's Marty. You never shut up, do you? And Martin Short comes in the trailer, and that was the first time I'd ever met him, too, as well. But it was immediately, it was just, everything was hysterical.
Yeah.
But that was, I'd only met him once. And even then, he was such a nice, gentle man. No airs about him, just a very pleasant guy.
Really down to earth. Yeah. Everybody is saying the same thing. And it's funny, now Martin Short is, when it was made public that Flaherty had died, he's the one that CBC called first and talked about how all of them got together on a Zoom call about a week before his death and had this last gathering with Joe Flaherty. Yeah, it's quite a story. Bill, listen, it's always a pleasure. I'm sorry. We and I could talk much longer. You're going to have to, when this other development, this secret development is comes to roost. Please, let's do this again. Okay. I shall. I want to get the rest of the story, but hats off to you, man, for all you've done, and just for sharing all of these stories now, and hope to run into you in person soon at some point, east or west, right?
Bill, I would be remiss if I did not say thank you for what you have done over the years for the talent of Canada. You provided a platform for them to have a light shone on them, and you've done it for as long as I've known it and known you, and that's since 1986. And you're to me, you're a Canadian icon in the media. No, you really are. People don't realize the impact.
Billy, thank you, sir.
Listen, I am a publicist, but you're one of the guys who is. And by the way, I was a publicist who never wrote a damn thing. I always hired somebody, but you were always there anytime. And I've seen you do it with so many actors, so much talent, where they have an opportunity to become known through your words. And thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Bill, for saying that. It was always been a pleasure. I'm just glad that the gentleman who was the producer of Night Heat, the police officer,
Sonny Grasso, who was the original guy in the French Connection.
I'm just glad he didn't shoot you when you came after him with a toy gun.
Oh, you know that story?
Oh my goodness, Bill!
He was at his desk in the office, and I jumped in the room with the toy gun, and within a flash, before you could move, out of his drawer came this biggest handgun I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah,
and he went, "Don't you ever effing do that to me again." He said, "I've got people who have a contract out on me, and you have no idea how close you just came."
Wow. Yeah. Well, let's salute Sonny Grosso then and thank him for having patience with you.
Yeah.
And anyway, Billy, you're the icon in the PR world for me. So back at you, and thank you again for having some time today to do this.
A pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, I want to kick off the thank yous this week to thank Pat Bullock, my old comedy team partner from back in the day. He was the voice of Foster Hewitt, Howie Meeker, and Paul Morris. Thank you, Pat. Thanks, as always, to producer Phil Hong, on the road this week, and yet still finding time to stitch this episode together somewhere between New York City and Philadelphia. Thanks to BJ Del Conte, Paul Boudreau, and the Crispy Critters, along with piano man Steve Dudley, for the music heard on these podcasts. Finally, thanks to you, listener. If you liked what you heard, pass it on, tell a friend. I'm Bill Brio. Thanks for listening.